I have this really bad habit of taking a million reference photos everywhere I go, and then sitting on them for almost a decade before I draw or paint them. My friend Karen Clark from Karen Clark Creations recently painted a starfish on her channel, and she and I had been talking in our group chat about like the reference photos, and I mentioned that I have some reference photos of some starfish from a trip my husband and I took together years ago, and she's like, well, you need to do it. And then in her video, she challenged me. She was like, I challenged Shanna to paint a starfish from one of her reference photos. So I had to dig and dig and dig. It was kind of a fun scavenger hunt, and I found those reference photos from 7/30/2015. Legitimately almost exactly 10 years ago. Like, what am I even doing with my life? I was so excited about those reference photos when I took them. So whatever, today we are going to be working on that. And then I thought, you know, this might be a good time to kind of dig into my pile of the to be reviewed art supplies that I have, which I have to say, I'm very proud of myself. I've whittled it down quite a bit, but then again, it's always growing. So I thought, you know what? If I'm using a really old reference photo that I've had for a long time, I should probably finally use some art supplies that I've had laying around for a while that I haven't used yet. And so that's how I decided to finally use this 24 set of Paul Rubens watercolors. I bought this mainly because of the cute tin. I mean, let's be real. I have their pink set of watercolors already, and I love them, but I saw this tin and I had to have it, and so I bought it, and I've had it for months in the studio, just sitting there waiting for me to use it, and so that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to use some paints that I've had laying around for a while, and I'm going to use a reference photo that I've had laying around for a very long while. So thank you, Karen, for getting me off my butt and telling me to do this. Let's just jump into it. Okay, so let's take a look at this set. So much fun. I love this almost tie-dye, rainbowy, watercolory look. And again, that is what attracted me to this to begin with. They also included a swatch card, which has the light fast pigment information and transparency information. And it's on their glitter paper, which I love. And they included a pamphlet that shows us all the different colors that they have, along with the light fast and pigment information again, and the transparency info. So that is useful to have if you are looking into getting their paints or other sets of their paints. Now let's open up this beautiful tin. I love it so much. Even if I don't like the paints, I'm keeping this tin. And they have little papers on the outside of their paints, but no plastic, which I kind of like. I like that they're not using as much plastic. One of them slid out of their little paper overwrap. Let's take a closer look at these colors. We have here Chinese white, flesh-colored, lemon yellow hue, cadmium yellow hue, gamboge hue, cadmium red pale hue, cadmium red hue, cadmium red deep hue, permanent rose, alizarin crimson hue, purple lake, cerulean blue hue, ultramarine, and Mars black as extras, cobalt blue hue, another ultramarine. That's weird. We have two ultramarines here. One of them's an extra and one's in the main set. I think that's kind of interesting. And then we have intense blue, indigo, sap green, hooker's green light, emerald, burnt sienna, raw umber, an upside down Van Dyke brown, burnt umber, and ivory black. Each of the little paper wrappers have the light fastness information along with the pigment information and transparency and the name on the front. And I like to write that information right on the pan after I unwrap it. Now I'm going to swatch them out. And there are a few things that I found to be interesting. It looks like they are doing a 1 through 5 star light fast rating, with 5 stars being the highest light fastness. However, I find it really interesting that some of these colors are as light fast as they're claiming. For instance, their purple lake color, which is beautiful, by the way, is pigment PR88. Now, it's really difficult to get a good light fast purple, so I did look up the PR88 pigment online, and generally speaking, it's not typically very light fast. So I'm not sure how much I really trust the light fast ratings. I don't know. It is what it is. I have here some of their glitter paper, and it has like this very slight glitter texture to it, which shows through the transparent watercolors really well. I love this paper. I used this in my previous video where I tried out the pink set. So that's what I'm going to be using again today. And I should mention, this video is not sponsored by Paul Rubens. I bought these paints myself. I just thought it would be fun to use them on some of their paper that I already had on hand. I have one of my Holbein colored pencils, and I just laid down some markings on the paper where I wanted to mask out some white areas in the details of the starfish. And now I'm just going in and painting my stones surrounding the starfish. I had a lot of fun with this. I have to say, I do think that there is a good variety of colors here. In my previous video, I was a little bit leery about the amount of blues. There's quite a few blues in this set as well, but they do have a good range of warm and cool colors and earth tones. I really like the fact that they included an extra Mars black, because the other black that was included in this set, the ivory black, which was in the main part of the set, it's a little bit more transparent than the Mars black I found, and I really like to have a nice dark black for things that obviously need deep shadows. Now, typically speaking, I will mix my black watercolor with other colors as well, so I have more of a dynamic black, but I always like finding the darkest dark black I can find, and so I really enjoyed the Mars black more than their regular ivory black for this set. But as far as the other colors go, like I said, I think the Purple Lake is a really beautiful color. You'll see me use that a little bit in the starfish. And the rest of the earth tones were great. There's only 3 greens. I do kind of wish there was more greens, but I'm really happy with the greens that they included. I am a big sap green girl, and I like the Hooker's green light as well. The emerald is beautiful. I'm more of a warm green person, so I don't always go for the emerald, but it does offset the other 2 really well. As usual, I have started in the background of my painting, and I'm just laying in the stones, and I'm working light to dark, meaning I am putting down lighter layers and then I'm going to build them up over time to get higher saturation. And there are some areas in the shadow areas that are a little bit darker than others that I went right in with my darker colors to begin with, because I know that those are going to be super dark. But even in those areas, I had to layer a little bit. And these paints layer really, really well. I think that there obviously is going to be some variation as far as transparency goes. I think there's a good mix here between transparent, semi-transparent, and opaque colors. Their white is supposed to be opaque. I was not a huge fan of the white. It's definitely not as opaque as I would have liked. Their flesh color is pretty opaque. I found that to be easier to work with than the Chinese white. So later on, you are going to see me bring in some of the bleed-proof white by Dr. P.H. Martins to really bring up the highlights. But for now, I am working mainly on my underlayers of these rocks. I'm going back and forth between my darks and my lights, and I'm building up the texture and I'm building up the saturation. And I had so much fun with these rocks. It really makes me want to do another rock painting. You've seen me do it on the channel before with my ink tents, but I kind of want to just do one with watercolors. So I'm going to have to dig through all my other reference photos and see what I have for rocks, because I'm a rock collecting lady. I love me some rocks, so I know I have other reference photos of them. But I would like to do that in the future. I think that would be fun to do with some granulating watercolors. So stay tuned for that, because that's probably coming up sometime on the channel. And I'm really glad that I finally got around to painting this reference photo. I changed things up quite a bit for this photo. It actually wasn't as zoomed in as it appears here. I wanted to have a tighter composition so I could focus on the starfish a little bit more. And these were taken in tidal pools, and in some of them the water was moving back and forth, so I would wait for the water to move out so I could take a picture of the starfish and get a clearer picture. And then the water would move back in. And so I'm going to actually create an effect later on that makes it look like he's underwater a little bit more, because I think that's where my starfish little fellow is probably most comfortable, is underwater a little bit. But for my reference photo, he was not underwater. So it's going to be interesting. A lot of the details that I'm putting in now, I'm actually getting a little extra detailed on some of these rocks, because I know that I'm going to have to come over with some opaque white later on to create the look of water. And so I want to have some hefty detail in there so that it still shows through. And you'll see that later on. So I'm putting a lot of work into these rocks that may be a little bit covered up later on, but I think it comes together pretty well. And I also changed the color of some of the rocks, and I put rocks into places where I didn't see any before. For instance, in the top of my reference photo, the starfish and some of the stones were covered a lot more with seaweed. I didn't want to do that much seaweed. I'm more interested in doing the stones. So I actually got rid of some of the seaweed and made up some stones to go along with it. Just because you have a reference photo doesn't mean you have to follow it exactly. And so I was doing what I needed to do. I was making the decisions I needed to make this the best painting that it can be and to make it my vision. And I do that a lot with my reference photos, even in things that are a lot more realistic than this. Even in my most realistic colored pencil pieces, I'm always making decisions and changes to my reference photos to make it the best kind of artwork that it can be. And I do love starting with my own reference photos. You've heard me talk about this before. It's like painting my own memories. When my husband and I went to this beach and we saw starfish everywhere, it was like pure magic. It was one of the most amazing experiences I had had up to that point in my life. It was wonderful, and there was nobody around on that beach. It was just him and I, and there was like this really cool like cliff feature. I don't know. It was just so neat. I honestly can't believe it's already been 10 years. So I took a ton of photos at that time. I didn't have the best camera at the time, so they're not the best, most detailed photos that they could be. And even the lighting wasn't so great because I don't even know if it was my phone. It might have been my phone at the time. It was a much older phone, obviously. It was 10 years ago. So they weren't the best photos. It's not something that I would sell as a photograph. However, I captured enough detail with the photos, and I have that memory so ingrained in me that it was nice to combine the feeling of the memory with the photos that I had. And so that's another way that I end up adding a little bit of water in later on, or the look of water coming over them, the rocks and the starfish later on, because I'm combining my memories and my feelings with the photos that I had. And I think that's one of the best things about working from your own photos. And so I just found the rest of the photos from that day as well, and I've transferred them to my most current hard drive so that I have access to them, because I have other starfish photos too from that same day. There's an orange starfish, and there's also some crab photos I took, and I think it's really cool. So I might be working from this batch again at some point. I can't guarantee it'll be anytime soon, because this is not the only time I've done this. I take photos wherever I go because I like to capture my memories and I like to paint my memories, and I'm always looking at the world through the lens of a painter and through the lens of an artist, and what about this situation can I make into art? And so I have a lot of reference photos. And I found a lot of other older reference photos that I transferred over as well to my current hard drive while I was looking for these photos. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have those photos too. I should probably paint that at some point. So it's kind of been a journey, and I'm really, really glad that my friend Karen was like, oh, you should also paint a starfish. We should paint starfish in July. So it ended up working out because I was able to dig through and be re-inspired by some of my older reference photos. So I am just going through and laying in my stones. I'm also paying attention to the colors. I'm saturating some of the colors a little bit. And I changed the color of some of the stones as well so that it creates a more well-balanced composition. So you're going to see me place warmer tones against cooler tones and place certain colored rocks throughout the composition so it balances things out. I am just enjoying every minute of this. This actually took me a lot longer than I expected it to. Of course, I had to choose the reference that had the most stones in it because I love me my rocks and I love me my details and I love to make myself work really hard at something. So I chose the most detailed of them. I have, other references of starfish just laying on a rock. I could have done that, but that would have bored me. So I wanted to do the rocks. And so this took me a lot longer than I expected it to, but time flew. I did not realize how long it was taking me. Usually I work on a painting session for maybe an hour at a time. And of course, it's much easier for me to paint longer than it is for me to draw longer, because painting is much easier on my hand and my arm. So I may not take as many breaks as I do when I'm drawing. Before I knew it, it had been like an hour and a half on my first painting session, laying in these rocks. I was just listening to music. I had my dog next to me snuggling, and I was enjoying spending time with these rocks and putting in all the fun different details and watching the watercolor be watercolor. And it took me almost as much time the next day to finish it up. I've always enjoyed working with the Paul Rubens watercolors. Even though I'm not so sure about their light fast ratings sometimes, I think it's really odd that this one has the 1 through 5 light fast rating, and when I reviewed the other one, it had a 1 through 8 light fast rating system. I don't know. As far as I know, they use the blue wool scale for their light fastness. You know, I like that they are providing light fast information and that they're providing the pigment information, but I'm not somebody who knows all the pigments by heart. I had to look up the Purple Lake one, like I said, and find out that information for myself. So if you're ever questioning when you get any sort of set of watercolors, if it provides the pigment information, please, you know, if you're questioning about light fastness, do your own research on the pigments that they say they've provided. Whether or not that information is accurate, I don't know. I think these are very reasonably priced paints, and you get a lot of bang for your buck with them. They're beautiful to work with. They're easy to work with. They're vibrant. And I've never had any trouble getting the effects that I need out of this set or the set that I've tried before. I very thoroughly enjoy working with these paints. So that's something to consider as well. I don't know that I will sell this original because I am using that purple a little bit in the starfish. And so I don't know that I'll sell the original of this, but honestly, I have a coastal sea theme in my bedroom. So I think this little guy might want to hang up in my bedroom because I think that'd be really fitting. I also have a gouache picture that I did from life of my husband when we were visiting the coast on vacation hanging in there, and I have other sea-themed things that I've painted in there. So I think this one might want to go hang out in my bedroom. So I will sell prints of it though. I'm going to offer prints of it. You're going to see me come back and forth with a bunch of different kinds of tools as well, mainly the bougie paper towels and Q-tips. And the Q-tips aren't even that bougie because they're not even Q-tip brand. They're like IGA brand. But I do a lot of lifting in this. That's actually one of the ways I like to create texture on stones is I like to put my washes down and then lift certain areas. It creates little dapples of light. It creates little dapples of texture, and stones have a lot of texture to them. So that's one of my ways of building texture. So when you see me come in with a paper towel, sometimes I'm correcting something that I didn't really want to lay down, like if it's too saturated or if the water goes in a place that I really wasn't hoping for. Yeah, you'll see me correcting some of that as well. But most of the time, the reason why you're seeing me come in with a paper towel as much as I am is because I'm trying to build up that texture. So it's really kind of a dance with the lifting and putting things down, lifting and putting things down. And I'm being very careful not to rub the paper because I don't want the paper to get overworked. So it's really just some dabbing involved. You'll also see me come through with my brush and lift things with clean water to create some water ripples. And the Q-tips, I am dragging a little bit across. I'm wetting the Q-tip first, and I'm dragging it across the stones to get that water ripple effect. Now, I did not have a reference for this water ripple effect, and I'm really only looking for that feeling of water rippling. I don't need it to be photorealistic. I just want it to be an impression of the feeling of water going over some of these stones and the stones sticking up some out of the water. I did come in with the white from the set, and it didn't do as well as I would have hoped. And then I came through, as I mentioned before, with the flesh color, and the lighter part that you're seeing me put down is actually some of that flesh color. It worked pretty well because a lot of the stones were warm in color anyway. So when I went over that yellow rock up in the corner, it definitely didn't cause any issues to have the water ripples looking that way. A lot of times when the sun shines through water onto stones, you get a little bit of a yellow cast anyway, so the flesh color actually worked pretty well for that. And again, later on, I'll bring in my bleed-proof white to really beef things up. I spent a lot of time on this background, but I think anybody who has followed me for a long time knows that's not unusual for me. I think a lot of people are under the impression that because the background is not the main subject, that it's not as important as the main subject. However, I find it to be very important in bringing out the main subject. Now, some people think that that just means throwing in a blurry background with no thought. And I find that a lot of times when that happens, it kind of shows. If you're somebody who hates backgrounds and you just put something in because you're like, I got the fun part done, I did my main subject, who cares about the background? That leads to a piece that's not as cohesive. The background is a perfect opportunity to bring life to your subject, to bring out your subject, whether it be a bokeh background that is a little bit more blurry and your subject is more sharp, or contrasting colors to your subject, anything that's going to help emphasize the subject. But when it's just an afterthought, it usually becomes pretty obvious. It doesn't have to be crazy detailed or anything like that, but it should at least have some thought put into it so that it is cohesive with your main subject, so that you can have a beautifully rendered piece all over and not parts of it that are clearly an afterthought. It's kind of like how some people hate to paint hair. So they'll do a beautiful, intricate portrait and then the hair will just be flat. And it becomes obvious because it's not cohesive that somebody didn't put the thought into it. So I feel like if your subject is interesting enough to paint and you really want to bring that subject out, then it also deserves the time and energy and thought put into the background to support that subject. And I'm referring to mainly like more finished artworks, not like your sketchbook work. I just think that backgrounds should be more of an active decision for things that you consider a more finished artwork. Totally went off on a tangent there, but I just think it's important to note. So obviously now I'm working on my starfish. I'm bringing in various colors. I'm not just using my purple. I'm bringing in my alizarin crimson hue a little bit here and there. I'm bringing in some of that permanent rose, which is PV19. It's a nice magenta color. And I'm bringing in some of my blues. I'm using some of my ultramarine. I'm using some of my intense blue and some of the cerulean blue hue for the shadow areas to make it more of a nice violety color in those areas. And then once I have some of those colors laid in, while I'm waiting for it to dry, I'm going around and I'm cleaning up some edges and cleaning up some details. And this is when you're going to see me go back and forth between the starfish and its background. I'm letting some things dry where I need to. I wanted it to be nice and wishy-washy on the starfish as well, because the starfish also has distinctive texture. And now you're able to see where I laid in that colored pencil in the beginning. I put some of the spikes that I wanted to remain white in colored pencil. Colored pencil is wax and oil based, so it repels water. So it works great as a masking tool for places that you want to keep clean and white, because once you put your watercolor over it, it's going to disperse the color away from those areas and they will remain clean. And my Holbein colored pencils are great for that. That's one of my go-to whites now, and so that's why I grabbed that one. But any colored pencil that you have will do. A wax crayon would work really well for bigger areas. And you can use different colors too. I used the white because that's what I needed for this starfish, but I could have used a lighter purple or something to get a similar effect. Now I'm coming in with that bleed-proof white and I am creating some areas. You're going to see me lighten up areas, and it's almost a little bit jarring, like the veins on the seaweed and certain areas, but I'm going to come through with my watercolors again once that's dry and layer it over it so that like the veins of the seaweed will become yellow. I just wanted to lighten it up so I could put watercolor over it. In some places, I'm going to end up washing out. I'm really experimenting in this part because, again, this part was not in my reference. So I'm trying to feel it out and see what feels right and feels natural, but doesn't detract. So you're going to see me go back and forth a lot with putting it in and being like, maybe I don't like that, and lifting it out or painting over it. And it worked really well, though. I had a lot of fun with this part, too, because I was really just kind of using my imagination here. And I do think things came together pretty well. A lot of lifting. And then in some areas, I'm going to come back and darken up my shadows again, too, if they've gotten too wiped out by me adding in that bleed-proof white. or just in places where I want to tighten up my edges. So basically, again, like you've heard me talk about with my ink tints, I go in with lighter washes, I go in more loosely, and I tighten things up, and I become more saturated as I go along with layering, and more detailed as I go along with my layering. Messy to clean, light to dark, or light to saturated in some of the aspects of this. But as I said, pretty much got everything that I needed out of this set. The white was pretty much useless. I'm not somebody who really likes white watercolor to begin with. I'm not a prude. I'm not against using white in watercolor, just like I'm not against using black. I'm not a purist. I will use whatever tools necessary to get the job done. I just don't think white watercolor typically gets the job done. I usually reach for a white gouache or a bleed-proof white when I want to use an opaque white with my watercolors, because most of the time, the ones that are included in a watercolor set are not opaque enough. And I'll also use colored pencils to tighten up some things as well. Basically anything to get the job done, although my use of colored pencil in this one was very minimal this time. I didn't feel the need to bring in a lot to create my details. I brought it in a few areas, again, to mask things out, but also to beef up some of the details in the starfish. But for the most part, it was done with watercolors and then the bleed-proof white. But yeah, I really love my little starfish. I am so happy that I painted it, and I'm super inspired. I want to do some more in the future. And I also want to go and get more reference photos. I want to see some more in person. Let me know what you think of this painting, and let me know if you've tried these paints before and if you like them and what you think of this set. I had a blast with it, and you'll see me using this set probably in future videos. Look at this beautiful starfish. And I had so much fun on the glitter paper as well. Here it is. You can kind of see the glitter in this lighting. It still shines through. And I think that's perfect since stones usually have some sort of glitter in them. And there's water, and water is sparkling. So I think that the paper was also a great choice for this. I love it so much. Here is the final piece scanned in. I will have this offered as prints on my website. This was a lot of fun, and I think Karen challenging me really made it so that I finally got off my butt and did it. I think that when I take reference photos that I love a lot of times I'm intimidated by them, and it takes me a while to figure out how I want to approach them, sometimes apparently 10 years. So this challenge kind of just made me jump right into it. And I had a blast. I loved the paints. They did everything I needed them to do. And I'm glad that I finally worked from one of the reference photos that I've had in my stash for a very long time. If you liked this video, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the like button to let me know you liked it. Maybe leave a comment. And also, go check out Karen's channel. She is amazing. I love her very much. She's one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. And so I will link her channel in the description below. I will see you next time. You have a fantastic day. Bye.